Inside 10 minutes until touchdown, a great view of the Soyuz MS-12 from cameras at the landing site about 92 miles to the southeast of the town of Zhezkazgan. Everything has proceeded in perfect fashion for Hague, Ovchinin, and Al-Mansouri, who are just minutes away from completing their respective missions.
Unintelligible.
About 8 minutes until touchdown, everything proceeding normally. The crew reporting it is in good shape. All of the events have unfolded in perfect fashion so far. Less than 6 minutes until touchdown. Everything is in great shape as you continue to watch the Soyuz descend under its main parachute, heading for the landing site in south-central Kazakhstan, where the search and recovery forces are standing by to approach the vehicle after touchdown. They'll safe the vehicle and then begin the process of extracting the crew. The search and recovery forces have established communications with the crew on board the Soyuz MS-12, and they report they are feeling well. 2.5 minutes till touchdown. You're watching the methodical descent of the Soyuz MS-12 under its main parachute on a cloudless day in south central Kazakhstan. Temperatures around 62 degrees Fahrenheit at the landing site.
Yeah, unintelligible.
Just a few minutes away from the end of the mission for Hague, Ovchinin, and Al-Mansouri. Hague and Ovchinin wrapping up a journey of 86.1 million miles. Al-Mansouri wrapping up a 3.3 million mile mission over 8 days. And you can see one of the Russian Mi-8 helicopters, so we are approaching the moment of touchdown. Touchdown, right on the money, at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:59 p.m. at the landing site. The soft landing engines having fired, the main parachute now reefing. Nick Hague, Alexei Ovchinin, and Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri are home. Russian Mi-8 helicopters circling in the vicinity. They'll be landing in sequential fashion. A dozen prime helicopters at the landing site. It appeared to be a bullseye touchdown for the crew members on board the Soyuz MS-12. Again, touchdown at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time. To recap, the Soyuz MS-12 is back on Earth with its crew of Nick Hague, Alexei Ovchinin, and Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri. Hague and Ovchinin wrapping up 203 days in space and aboard the International Space Station. Mansouri's 8-day mission at an end for the United Arab Emirates. Russian search and recovery helicopters are landing now in sequential fashion in the vicinity of the spacecraft. The first team of technical specialists will be safing the spacecraft and beginning the process of extracting the crew. This is Mission Control Houston. This view of the flight control room at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow. The live television views that you've been enjoying watching the Soyuz MS-12 descend to its landing under its main parachute will be regaining a television view once the all-terrain vehicles that house the television equipment and the uplink satellite dish reposition themselves right at the capsule. So we should be getting that TV back shortly. A bullseye touchdown on time for Soyuz MS-12 and Hague, Ovchinin, and Al-Mansouri at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:59 p.m. at the landing site in Kazakhstan, about an hour and 58 minutes prior to sunset. Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the search and recovery forces, and all-terrain vehicles at the landing site are making their way towards the Soyuz spacecraft to begin the process of safing the vehicle and extracting the crew. All of the events from hatch closure to undocking to the deorbit burn and all of the entry activities per the timeline went off without a hitch. It was a perfectly nominal entry and landing for Hague, Ovchinin, and Al-Mansouri. We are waiting to regain live television from the landing site where the Soyuz MS-12 touched down about 10 minutes ago. This is Mission Control Houston. The search and recovery force is now reporting that the Soyuz vehicle landed on its side. The RSC Energia personnel on the first couple of helicopters are on the scene and report that the crew is feeling well. This is Mission Control Houston, back with live video from the landing site. A look at Alexei Ovchinin. There is Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri, the crew having been quickly extracted from the Soyuz vehicle that landed on its side 16 minutes ago at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time. This is Mission Control Houston. All three crew members are now out of the Soyuz spacecraft in their chairs to get their land legs back for a short period of time before they're carried into the medical tent. On the scene is NASA Public Affairs Officer Gary Jordan. Gary, if you can hear me, give us a look-see at what's happening at the landing site.
Rob, it's a beautiful day out here at the landing site. Perfectly clear skies and sort of a brisk wind happening right now. But all the otherwise, a very good temperature for the crew. Now just coming out of the capsule, seated right in front for the first time, breathing fresh air from the Earth in 203 days. I was arrived just after Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri was extracted. As you mentioned, they were extracted very quickly after the Soyuz did land. As you can see now, positioned on its side, and the crew members were extracted from there. Lots of personnel out here, as you can probably see. Everyone gathering to see the crew members who are now able to talk to their families. But a lot of excitement here that's surrounding the three crew members completing their journey after 203 days, coming back safe and sound here in the steppes of Kazakhstan on their Soyuz MS-12.
Gary, we are seeing Alexei Ovchinin at the moment. Give us a timeline, if you will, of activities from this point until the crew begins its return to Karaganda.
Well, it won't be very long after they are done talking to their families. You can see them positioned in seats right in front of the capsule. Very shortly from this moment, they'll be carried over to a medical tent, which, as you're looking at the crew members, is to the right. I would say probably about 50 yards to the right, so relatively close compared to some of the times I've seen the tent in the past. Once they're carried over to the medical tent, they'll be examined for their health and undergo a series of tests. Nick Hague and Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri will undergo tests called standard measures, which are a subset of some of the field tests that we've seen before to test the astronauts' performance immediately after landing and getting adjusted back to Earth's gravity. Alexei Ovchinin will undergo the full field test, which is a longer series of tests, and that will carry them for at least more than an hour, if not more. The sun should be setting just around the time that those field tests are wrapped up and the tent is deconstructed, and some of the last helicopters will fly over to Karaganda. At the Karaganda airport, we'll have a short ceremony to celebrate the three crew members coming home now, and they'll be presented with gifts from there.
Gary, it seemed as if the extraction of the crew, we did not see them extracted in real time, but it seemed like it went very quickly.
We encountered the same thing. We were able to actually visualize some portion of the landing. We were probably one of the middle helicopters to land. There was about probably 6 helicopters that had landed before us. But by the time we got down, Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin have both been extracted, and Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri was extracted shortly thereafter. But you're right, they were extracted in a relatively quick time frame, and now it seems like they're already positioning themselves to carry the crew members over to the medical tent and proceed with some of those tests, including the standard measures test from the Human Research Program, as well as the field test.
And we've gotten a view of NASA astronaut Nick Hague seated to the left of Alexei Ovchinin, the same configuration that they were seated in for entry and landing. Pat Forrester, NASA's chief astronaut, is right by Nick's side. As usual, for all three crew members, medical personnel providing initial attention to the three crew members, but none of them looking worse for wear. So how long now before you expect the crew members and yourself, frankly, to be airborne back to Karaganda, Gary?
Well, the crew themselves, as I mentioned, some of those standard measures tests are just a shorter series of tests that should be wrapped up in about under an hour. But even now, you can see Alexei Ovchinin actually being carried to the medical tent, again, about 50 yards to the right of the crew members. He'll be the first. Nick Hague following shortly behind Alexei Ovchinin, and Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri will take up the rear. Once those tests begin, those tests should wrap up in just under an hour. The field test itself for Alexei Ovchinin will be a little bit longer of a test, but it won't be long until after those tests completed that the flight back to Karaganda, which should just be a little under 3 hours, will proceed shortly after that.
Gary, it looks like everything is proceeding by the book, as was all of the entry milestones for this crew back home safely on Earth. We thank you for your reports from the landing site, and have a safe trip back to Karaganda and back to Houston.
Thank you, Rob, and as always, it's a pleasure to be part of these activities. You see people from all over the world come together to make this a possibility, and it really takes a team to make it a reality. Appreciate it.
Gary Jordan, NASA Public Affairs Officer at the landing site, as you see Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri being carried by fellow personnel from the United Arab Emirates Space Agency. Al-Mansouri, the first Emirati citizen to fly in space, now entering the medical tent, where he, Hague, and Ovchinin will undergo medical tests, get out of their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits into more comfortable flight clothing. Once that all is completed, they will board individual helicopters for a 2-hour flight from the landing site back to Karaganda, the staging city, which is to the northeast of the landing site. The crew will split up at that point, with Ovchinin and Al-Mansouri flying back in a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft to Star City, Russia, their training base outside of Moscow. Nick Hague will board a NASA Gulfstream jet for the flight back to Houston. And back in the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston at Mission Control. We have been with you throughout the course of the night with the safe return of the 3 crew members from the International Space Station, astronaut Nick Hague, NASA astronaut, along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin, and visiting astronaut Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri from the United Arab Emirates, back home safely, having landed at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time. The Soyuz MS-12 had a perfect entry back to Earth. All of the undocking and entry milestones were achieved without any issues whatsoever. The vehicle landed on its side at the landing site, almost a bullseye touchdown, 92 miles to the southeast of the town of Jezkazgan. The crew was quickly extracted, the vehicle landing on its side, but the search and recovery personnel got to the vehicle very quickly, extracted the crew, and they're now in the medical tent, receiving their initial medical tests, getting out of their Sokol launch and entry suits into more comfortable clothing for helicopter flights back to the staging city of Karaganda, Kazakhstan. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage for this morning. The Soyuz MS-12 and its crew safely back on Earth, mission accomplished. Thank you for joining us throughout the night. This is Mission Control Houston.